stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now, huh?
Thanks, Jerry, and hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access television series. I'm Bill Wildt, and this is the 1423rd edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today, we continue our explanation of what Motorsports Unlimited has been all about for the past 30-plus years. As explained many times, our interest is the survival of motorsport and all of the attendant things that activity provides. In the last episode, Explanation 14, we talked about the loss of Lake Geneva Raceway in 2006. This added to the losses of Chicago area racetracks in my lifetime. O'Hare Stadium in 1968, Santa Fe Speedway in 1995, Raceway Park in 2000, not to mention Oswego Drag Raceway in 1979, and US 30 Drag Strip in 1984. Of course, these weren't the only Chicago area tracks lost, but they were the ones we lost in my lifetime and at which I personally raced. Certainly, these losses were painful to me, and coupled with information I happened upon in the late 50s that indicated there were more than 2,500 racetracks in America in 1953, and by the late 50s, we were down to 800. My personal life experiences, along with what I'd learned in the late 50s, was in part the basis for creating Motorsports Unlimited. As a person old enough to remember before there was television, I saw all of the changes television's influence had brought to American life. I entered kindergarten in 1948, first grade in 1949. There was no television. I remember my father rigging up curtain rods in the early 50s in rural upstate New York to try to get this new thing called television working out in the country where we lived. We eventually were able to watch, sort of, professional wrestling from Marigold Gardens in Chicago. I still remember names like Hans Schmidt, Yukon Eric, and Luthez. Even in its earliest days, television had power. Mind you, we lived in upstate New York, watching something called professional wrestling from Chicago. We also saw Nat King Cole on television. There were no black people in upstate New York, but we liked Nat King Cole. Of course, there was only one channel, so we pretty much liked everything that was on when we could get reception. We moved to Chicago in 1955 and were very excited to find there were 3 channels. By this time, the power of television was obvious to anyone who cared to look. Everyone watched television by now, and what was on television was what we talked about in school. I remember going to a Cubs game because I saw them on television. I wasn't much of a baseball fan, but in upstate New York, you either pulled for the Brooklyn Dodgers or the New York Yankees. I wasn't exactly a fan, but I was aware of the great Brooklyn Dodger pitcher, Sandy Koufax. I wanted to see Sandy Koufax pitch, so I went to a Cubs game when Koufax was scheduled. We lived about 10 blocks from Wrigley Field and could hear the fans cheer when someone hit a home run. I don't remember much about the game, but I did get a picture of Koufax walking off the mound. I was sitting on the first base side. It couldn't have been expensive, but I just don't remember. Going to a Cubs game or a Bears game, who also played at Wrigley Field, wasn't really a big deal at the time. This was long before television elevated them to a must-see status. It's odd seeing what television accomplished. I recall attending a couple of Bears games because my little brother was interested in football. I didn't think much of it. It sort of looked like men crouching down, then running into each other, then starting over again and again. My brother found it more interesting than me, but I guess he understood it better. Looking back, I find it interesting that I now have a real appreciation for pro football, and it happened because television educated me. All sports entertainment requires an understanding in order to enjoy it. Very few believe me now, but football wasn't always a big deal, even after it was on television. Baseball was slower moving and easier to put on television with the awkward, cumbersome equipment available at the time. Looking back, everything really changed in 1957 when videotape was invented along with the instant replay. This gave television an opportunity to dissect the complicated game of football, and in perhaps a decade, television did what it does best: influence. And pro football started outpacing baseball in popularity. Something else also happened. It was no secret television was becoming a kingmaker, and with its success, a new problem emerged: space. Television space is extremely limited, and airtime became more valuable than gold. I know it's difficult to imagine now, but at one time, television signed off after the 10 o'clock news, and the stations broadcast a test pattern most of the night. Airtime was not yet fully appreciated. Can you imagine today turning on a television and nothing is on? I don't mean nothing good. I mean nothing. That's the way it was. I entered high school in 1957, and by then, television had consumed our culture. I could see it clearly. As a gearhead, I knew we wouldn't be around long if we didn't have a presence on television, particularly television sports news. This was free time that promoted the activities they covered. It was clear to me if we couldn't get the same kind of television coverage as those with whom we compete for public attention, we couldn't survive. Please notice I said the same kind of television coverage as those with whom we compete for public attention. This is important because I'm often asked, how much television sports news time am I talking about? The answer is the same as the other guys. We are not second-class citizens. In fact, I would argue our activities reward society with technical advancements from which everyone benefits rather than just frivolous entertainment the other guys offer. Regardless, at the very least, if some of the competitors in the sports entertainment marketplace are newsworthy, they all are. We cannot continue to allow our competitors for public attention to dominate the public consciousness through so-called television sports news. It's killing us. In the last couple of episodes in this explanation series within Motorsports Unlimited, we detailed some of the efforts we made with local Chicago area racetracks in order to make them part of the public consciousness. We talked about the loss of O'Hare Stadium in Schiller Park, Illinois in 1968, and Santa Fe Speedway in Willow Springs, Illinois in 1995. We talked about our coverage of Raceway Park in Blue Island, Illinois, and Lake Geneva Raceway in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Raceway Park closed forever in 2000. Lake Geneva Raceway closed forever in 2006. Today we're going to talk about another lost motorsport facility, Illiana Motor Speedway. It was located on Route 30 in Cherville, Indiana, just over the Illinois-Indiana border. Billed as the Chicago area's only paved half-mile, it was the largest Chicago area track. It operated since 1944 and a half, as track owner and builder Harry Mulliner stated. Yes, I know, Wikipedia says it opened in 1947, but I got 1944 and a half right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. In my first interview with Harry Mulliner, he told me the track opened as a dirt track for motorcycles in 1944 and a half. As a matter of fact, when I was introducing him on that interview, I said he was the man who dug the track out of the ground with his bare hands. He interrupted me and said, "No, we had shovels." I liked Harry. He had a wry sense of humor. By the way, the interview is in an episode of Motorsports Unlimited titled Artgo and Illiana Speedway. It's currently on YouTube. In any event, it took me 8 years to get Harry to go on camera, but for a while, I didn't think it would ever happen. My contact with Harry Mulliner didn't start as I would have hoped. Perhaps 30 years ago, just a few years after Motorsports Unlimited began, I received a phone call from Harry. I didn't know him at the time, but of course I had raced at Illiana Motor Speedway. Anyway, Harry was calling to tell me Illiana was not closing as I'd said on the air. I had to quickly search my memory banks to see if I could recall what he was talking about. I couldn't. Apparently, during an interview, I mentioned that I'd heard Illiana was closing. Harry wanted to make sure I knew that wasn't true. During the call, I learned Harry had a motorcycle shop in Hammond, Indiana. I told him I'd make the correction on the air and mentioned I'd like to come down to his shop and talk a little more about Illiana Motor Speedway to make sure I put the right information on the air. My trip to Harry Mulliner's Harley shop in Hammond, Indiana was interesting. I'd hoped to be able to talk him into doing an on-camera interview. It didn't take long for me to realize it wasn't going to happen. Harry was much older than I expected. His shop was a Harley-Davidson dealership, but it was like walking into the past. Everything about it was old, not in a bad way. I loved it, and Harry fit right in. Again, not in a bad way, but in a way that reminded you of the origin of motorcycling. To me, it was charming, and as I listened to Harry's stories, I realized he'd been there since the beginning, and he had his own kind of charm. Something on one of his counters caught my eye. As a two-stroke fan, I couldn't help but notice the Harley Hummer two-stroke engine he had on a stand on one of the shop's several counters. It's something I would notice because the Harley Hummer was a near copy of the German DKW motorcycle I had when I was 14 years old. There were lots of Harley Hummers running around when I got my DKW. Remember, I was 14 at the time and young males couldn't afford larger multi-cylinder machines, so guys in my age group bought inexpensive Harley Hummers. I was in a different position. My father was originally from Germany, and his father, my grandfather, had passed away in Germany, and my father was going to fly there for the funeral. I asked if he would look around for a motorcycle for me. I was under the impression one could buy a bike in Germany for less than half the cost in this country. It seemed like a great idea. My father wasn't crazy about me wanting a real motorcycle as opposed to the Whizzer motorbike I'd been salvaging and running around on, but he had one when he was a young man, so he grudgingly said he would look. When he returned from Germany, he brought a brochure of the motorcycle he'd purchased for me, with my money, of course. It was a German-made DKW RT 125, and they were going to ship it to me. I wore out that brochure showing people what I had on the way, sort of apologizing for the piece of crap Whizzer I'd purchased and gotten running. One thing that struck me as odd was, according to magazines, the Harley Hummer was rated at 3 horsepower and the DKW brochure indicated 6.5 horsepower. I didn't want to get my hopes up and thought it might be just a different way of measuring horsepower in Germany. I mean, the DKW engine in the brochure picture looked identical to the Harley Hummer engine. The horsepower difference was puzzling. Regardless, I had a real motorcycle coming and was excited. It turned out to be the longest summer of my life. There was no air freight available in the late 50s. Everything came by ship, and to a young man waiting for his first real motorcycle, it seemed to take forever. I don't remember how many months it took, but it was months, not weeks. Then, one day, my father came home from work and announced my motorcycle had arrived. He had it sent to the place where he worked because they had a forklift. I was elated, of course. You know, it's funny the things you remember. The brochure my father brought back from Germany showed 2 DKW 125 models. One had painted wheels and a painted tank with no chrome. The other, RT 125, featured chrome wheels and chrome side panels on the gas tank. My father told me he bought the one with painted wheels and tank because it saved me a lot of money, and he knew this purchase would pretty much wipe me out financially. And other than the frills, the machines were identical. When I got to my father's place of work, we immediately started opening the crate. The first thing I saw was a chrome wheel. I really got excited and quickly pulled more of the crate aside so I could see the tank. Sure enough, there it was, the chrome side panel tank, and better yet, the accessory passenger seat. It was indeed the deluxe model. I looked at my dad and asked if they'd made a mistake. He was smiling and just told me he didn't want me to get too excited while I was waiting. I never did understand why he did this, but with the crate fully removed, the DKW RT 125 was beautiful, and I couldn't have been more excited. I knew I had to service it before trying to ride, but after months of waiting, it was here. The manual I had to study was in the crate, and I had to go over it word for word. My parents translating the German for me. Yes, my heritage is German, both my mother and father, but I don't speak or read a word of it. I sure didn't want to damage a brand new machine. Oh yes, my mother insisted I demonstrate to my father that I could actually ride it before they turned me loose. It didn't matter to her that I'd rebuilt the Whizzer. I'd been riding for months and had a driver's license. Somehow to her, the DKW was more serious. It didn't make any difference. It was here, and I could touch it, and it was beautiful, a thrill I haven't forgotten to this day. As it turned out, after my father reluctantly reassured my mother that I did indeed know how to ride a real motorcycle rather than the bicycle-looking Whizzer, I was off. The DKW RT125 was a superb, well-finished machine. The Whizzer, by comparison, was somewhat of a contraption assembled out of aftermarket parts. The DKW was rock solid, well designed and finished, and loaded with features I didn't expect or really appreciate at the time. For example, it had a fully enclosed oil bath drivetrain, along with full hub brakes. That was state of the art at the time. While the standout feature I should have noticed immediately, plunger rear suspension, didn't even warrant a glance. I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't notice the Germans had blocked the rear suspension from working for shipping purposes until one day I noticed the apparently unneeded wood blocks. They didn't seem to be necessary, and after removing them, I could see the rear suspension could move as I put a load on the seat. Truth be told, I didn't really notice much difference. I'd been riding the bike for a month or so, and it seemed fine. I don't know if this is an advertisement for how well designed the seat was. It was excellent. Or a statement about how insensitive a 14-year-old boy can be. I suppose it was better when the rear suspension was working, but it was fine either way. I sure wish I had my 14-year-old back now. Oh yeah, if you're noticing the passenger seat, it struck me as odd too, but it proved to be perfect. The rider had a low seat height, and the passenger, usually a girl, could easily see over my shoulder. Everything about the DKW was exceptional, including the most important part. It was faster than the Harley Hummer. Much faster. It was a little puzzling at the time. I mean, they were both 125cc two-strokes, and there shouldn't have been that much difference. But there was. As a matter of fact, Harley later came out with a 165cc version of the Hummer, although they didn't call it the Hummer. We did. It was pretty much the same bike, just a bigger engine. Anyway, my DKW was faster than the 165 Hummer too. Of course, I was pleased, but it would be years before I understood why the difference. As it turned out, DKW invented modern loop scavenging that effectively doubled the power output of two-stroke engines. This was a development of one of the German engineers at DKW, whose name I won't even attempt, except the word doctor preceded it. It happened in about 1948. He reasoned that the low power output of two-stroke engines was because of inefficient cylinder scavenging necessary to evacuate used gases and simultaneously introduce fresh gases into the cylinder. Typically, this had been done for more than 50 years at that time by including a deflector on top of the piston, allowing incoming gases to enter the cylinder, strike the deflector, driving to the top of the cylinder head, helping push burned exhaust gases out to the open exhaust port. The DKW doctor reasoned that if they could angle the incoming gas transfer ports toward the rear of the cylinder, the troublesome, heavy, heat-holding, RPM-limiting piston deflector could be eliminated. It worked beautifully and changed two-stroke design forever. Or should I say, after people figured out how DKW was getting all this power out of the lightweight two-cycle motor. Interesting enough, many companies used the DKW 125 design to produce motorcycles. After World War II, the Germans were required to provide all the technical information about their vehicles to the victorious countries as war reparations. The British BSA Bantam was a copy of the DKW 125, as was the Harley Hummer, along with several Eastern Bloc countries who also made DKW clones. Oddly, none of them picked up on this loop scavenging in the cylinder. All of the DKW clones were decent machines, but lacked the power of the DKW. Now, I'm guessing here, but given the loop scavenging system was developed around 1948 and World War II ended in 1945, it's possible this technology didn't exist when Germany was forced to reveal all of its technology to the victors. It's also possible they successfully hid the technology until they began producing new machines after the war. My DKW RT125 was a 1958 model. It doesn't really make any difference. Any sharp engineer who knew what he was looking for could figure it out. But I must admit, I was really surprised at how many two-stroke manufacturers continued producing low RPM, low output two-strokes long after DKW began exporting the new technology. It's particularly noticeable in outboard motors. It took a long time for them to catch up. As for DKW, somewhere along the line they decided to get out of the motorcycle business and sold all of their patents and tooling to Yamaha of Japan, as Yamaha was getting into the motorcycle business. The first Yamaha 125 was a near replica of the DKW 125. I couldn't believe it. It looked like somebody put a DKW motor into a Japanese pressed steel frame. Of course, the Japanese weren't fooled, and all of the Japanese two-strokes featured DKW's advanced loop scavenging. Oh, For those who don't know, the Japanese motorcycle invasion occurred in the late 50s, and only Honda made 4-strokes. Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, and Bridgestone were all 2-strokes. Emission requirements eventually forced all of the manufacturers to switch to 4-strokes, but I feel sorry for young people today who never had a chance to ride these lightweight, high-performance 2-strokes. I loved them. Oh yeah, Illiana. I guess I got sidetracked again. We were talking about the Harley Hummer 125cc motor on a stand at Illiana track owner Harry Mulliner's Harley dealership in Hammond, Indiana. Of course, given my background, I noticed it immediately and asked Harry about it because it seemed unusual at a Harley dealership known for large, heavy machines. The unsaid question in my mind was, why feature a Harley Hummer motor Harley hasn't made in years? Harry had quite a story. It seemed following World War II, none of the young guys likely to buy motorcycles could afford the big machines. Somehow, Harry was aware of the lightweight European machines that could be purchased inexpensively and told Harley-Davidson that's what they needed to make. In fact, he went so far as to promise to purchase 200 machines if Harley could produce them. As it turned out, Harley took advantage of the German design and began building them, and Harry kept his promise. Because of this, the Harley factory presented him with the Harley Hummer motor on a stand. Some have suggested the Harley Hummer saved the Harley-Davidson Motorcycle Company. As we talked, we got along well. He seemed to appreciate I'd kept my promise about correcting the inadvertent comment I'd made about hearing that Illiana was closing, and I'd done it several times on the air. And Harry also seemed to appreciate that I'd taken time to personally visit. He told me a little of the story of his track called Illiana. It seems Harry owned a lot of property in northwest Indiana, and he was a motorcycle racer. He took it on himself with a few of his friends to start racing each other on his property. Over time, and as equipment was available, they built an oval track upon which they competed. Eventually, it became more formal, and the AMA became the sanctioning body for those dirt track races. I didn't get the whole story, but eventually Harry had a falling out with the AMA, got mad, paved the track, and opened it for stock car racing in 1961. Motorcycle racing at Illiana was gone by the late 50s. I didn't start racing motorcycles until 1969, so I missed Illiana as a motorcycle track. Harry was considerably older than me. As I stood in his Harley dealership listing, I got the idea he was having trouble with Harley-Davidson now. As near as I could gather, Harley wanted him to invest more than $1 million to upgrade his dealership to a modern Harley-Davidson boutique. As I looked at him, I couldn't really tell how old he was, but he had to be at least 80. I can't imagine at his age he'd be interested in investing that kind of money in a shop he certainly wouldn't like. I guess I could sort of understand what Harley was trying to do, but it sure sounded like they were being insensitive to his situation. Apparently, his purchase of 200 Harley Hummer motorcycles after the war that helped keep Harley going and provoked the factory gift Harley Hummer engine on a stand I kept glancing at had long been forgotten. I could tell something else by now. Harry wasn't the kind of guy to give in to pressure. I told him what I was doing with Motorsports Unlimited and invited him to participate, but I couldn't get him to sit down for an on-camera interview, even on my dime. Again, my sense was he wasn't the kind of guy who would respond to pressure. I was glad I went there and felt that there might be a future, but it would take time. While you're thinking about that, I want to mention something that happened recently. One of the rewarding things that happens when you do the kind of work I do is you make friends you don't know you had. A few days ago, I received an inquiry from a Lisa Hanley. It seems she is a member of the Streamwood Paramedic and Fire Department, and one of their team was retiring after 34 years. They were planning a retirement party and asked if we could provide an autographed picture, as apparently the retiree, Ross Runyon, along with the rest of the departments, are regular viewers of Motorsports Unlimited. Of course, I wanted to honor the request. The problem is, we're not ABC, NBC, or CBS, meaning we really don't have pictures available. I thought about it for a while, and I knew the guys would really rather have a picture of our motorsport girls, although I don't know if Lisa would really understand this, but I do. Unfortunately, since I've been laid up, we haven't had contact with any of the girls, and we don't have pictures. What to do? I decided it would be easier to stop by their party personally and congratulate Ross on his retirement and thank him for his years of service. It was really a nice event held at Morietti's in Bartlett, Illinois, and the people, including Ross, were surprised that I was there. I know it would have been better with the motorsport girls, and if there were any way to do it, I would have, Ross. But I'm getting old too. Enjoy your retirement. That was fun, and one can't help but wonder how many lives Motorsports Unlimited has touched over the years. Anyway, back to Illiana. After my visit with Harry Mulliner, I was not encouraged. It's not that I didn't like him. On the contrary, I sort of felt we were cut from the same cloth, so to speak. The problem in my mind was his age. In a way, he reminded me of Raceway Park's Pete Jennen. Not in any mannerisms or traits, just age. It was difficult for me to imagine a man of his age taking on the challenge of attracting an audience with numbers large enough to sustain our sport. He was from a different time. While I gave him part of my speech about our competitors in the sports entertainment marketplace enjoying an unfair and, in my opinion, illegal advantage attracting audience, it didn't land. Our age difference was a cultural chasm. I don't think he could even imagine what a fair opportunity to compete would look like. Don't get me wrong, Harry was a hero. He created and operated a motorsport facility and had been doing so for decades. He deserved and had my respect and admiration. I would have a hard time even imagining what he went through to create Illiana Motor Speedway. I mean, the permits that had to be acquired, the construction techniques that had to be learned, the political obstacles that had to be hurdled. The list goes on and on. Harry did it, while others only talked. Unfortunately, I could see the challenge had changed, and if motorsport was to survive, there were new hurdles that had to be conquered. Hurdles that didn't even exist when Harry built Illiana Motor Speedway. If you'll recall, when I talked with Pete Jennen, owner of Raceway Park in Blue Island, Illinois, he detailed how television had paid him money to film at his track in the late 50s, and while I certainly agreed that's the way it should be, I knew television wasn't coming. Worse, they wouldn't come even if they didn't have to pay. Motorsport had dropped so far out of the public consciousness, we couldn't sell tickets to even the handful of seats we had, and it would take far more seats than we had available to sustain the costs of motorsport. Pete, like Harry, didn't know why these opportunities were not being presented to them. But I did. Fortunately, I was able to deal with Barry at Raceway Park. Otherwise, I don't think we would have shot any shows there. I really didn't see a Barry around Harry Mulliner, someone closer to my age who might better understand what our omission from television sports news had done to us. It was a tough challenge for me. Illiana was important, and I really wanted to expose our Motorsports Unlimited audience to it, but I couldn't think of a respectful way to do it, and I certainly wasn't going to insult one of the people who created our sport. Over the years, I stopped by Illiana from time to time just to remind Harry Motorsports Unlimited was around. It wasn't a hard sell. I don't operate that way, and frankly, it's a little difficult to put your heart into a hard sell when you know if the person agrees, it's going to cost me money. Racetrack shows were difficult for us to do and cost us more than taping local car shows. Don't misunderstand. I wanted to do them. They were sort of the point of Motorsports Unlimited. But even funded, they were costly for us. During the next several years of Motorsports Unlimited, it was inevitable that I would get calls every year indicating US 30 was going to open again. That's a drag strip that closed in 1984, located several miles down the road from Illiana. And each year, after I'd get a call from someone who sounded like they knew something, and I guess my own enthusiasm, I'd travel to the old US 30 location and find nothing but weeds growing over what was left of the tower and pieces of the track. During these trips, I'd usually stop by Illiana Motor Speedway. It was on the way, just to say hello. Years went by and nothing happened. But somewhere around 1993, we were booked to shoot an art go show at Illiana. I really don't remember how this came about. Somehow I think Harry was involved, but I'm really not sure. It could have been Artco booked us. Again, I really don't remember. The important thing to me was it was an opportunity to get Illiana Motor Speedway in front of our Motorsports Unlimited audience. For me, this represented progress as I really wanted all of the local Chicago area tracks called to the attention of the public. That was one of the main reasons I created Motorsports Unlimited. I didn't want to lose these facilities, and if the public didn't even know they were there, I knew they couldn't generate the kind of revenue it takes to keep them as motorsport facilities. So, whether we were there to check out the Artco action or Illiana Motor Speedway, or both, I was elated. Of course, we started the show by chatting with Artco boss John McCarnes.
Today we're taking you on a trip to Chicagoland's only paved half mile. That's right, folks, you've heard us talk about it before. The fastest track in the Chicago area. Illiana Speedway, located just over the Illinois-Indiana border in Schererville, Indiana. Less than an hour from the loop. Today's visit is a very special one because the big guys are rolling in. We're talking ARTCO Racing. The big-time touring pros in the Midwest set to do battle on Chicagoland's fastest racetrack. And if all that isn't enough, this race counts in the season points battle to decide the Chicagoland Driving Championship. Maybe we better slow things down a little bit and start by explaining ARTCO and find out what they're trying to accomplish. Let's join Bill and the girls in the pits at Illiana Speedway in Schererville, Indiana on a lovely summer evening and chat with the man behind ARTCO.
Christine, where do you suppose we're at?
Illiana.
That's only part of it. We're at the big time now.
Okay, yes.
Yes, this is the big time, and we've got a fellow here that I understand is primarily responsible for it. First of all, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Well, my name's John McCarnes, and I'm the president of the ARTCO Challenge Series, and we're racing here at Illiana twice this year. Tonight's the Chicagoland Showdown.
In the opening, Carl King, our announcer, indicated Illiana was located only an hour from the Loop. For those not familiar with Chicago, the Loop is the middle of downtown Chicago. The name comes from the elevated train that loops around downtown Chicago. We made this reference so people wouldn't think because Illiana was located in Indiana that it wasn't close to Chicago. In fact, there are many people who live in Chicago who are physically closer to Illiana Motor Speedway than they are to Chicago's O'Hare Airport. It's fair to call it a Chicago area track. As indicated in the opening, Illiana was a big, fast, paved half mile.
That's Larry Schuler in car number 30, joining the lead battle.
This entire show is posted on YouTube titled ARTCO Racing and Illiana Speedway. Toward the end of the show, and just before the feature event, I accomplished what I hoped I'd accomplish.
No one but no one is going to believe that I've pulled this off. First of all, I want our audience to know that what we have here are some real heroes in motorsport. And first of all, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you. And you are?
Harry Mulliner.
From?
Hammond, Indiana, from Illiana and with Illiana.
Okay. And you are?
Sidney Mulliner, same.
Okay, and we could talk about a lot of things. This is the owner, not just the owner of Illiana Speedway, but the guy that literally clawed it out of the ground with his bare hands how many years ago?
Oh, I had shovels and stuff.
Shovels. As a matter of fact, you're an old motorcycle flat tracker, if I understand it right.
Yeah, when we laid the track out, I was recuperating from an accident in Michigan on a motorcycle track. We worked for many years building it, and we're still working at it.
Do you remember when you put the track together?
Well, right after the war, we were using this place for Civil Air Patrol maneuvers and so forth, and then after we got through, we traded one of the planes for a bulldozer and went to work. And then we got a grader, and then found out it was a lot of work, and we got a contractor out here to finish the job, and it was a dirt track up until '61, and then we decided too much dust, and we paved it. So
now what year did you actually start it?
1945, I would say, 44 and a half, 45. Right after the war, we were monkeying with it before the armistice was signed, and then we went to work after the papers were okay and so forth. But right after, let's say 45, 46, we use it for motorcycles, picnic rallies and so forth, stuff like that. And then we, after 1948, the people talked about, why don't you run stock cars? So we added the stock cars, and then they finally took over. And motorcycles didn't have the audience that the stock cars did at that time, and we've stayed with them ever since. Once we paved it, they can't ride bikes on it, they're too fast, and so we're with the automobiles.
You're obviously no kid anymore, and I've got to ask you a question. Do you still have enthusiasm for the racing?
Sure, that's the only reason we're here now. We want to keep it going, and we decided to work at it and make it a bigger, better place, and safer, and have more fun, and like a family place to come to instead of a bunch of rowdies. We've had a real good follow through with the cooperation of our local talent and people that come from all over. Like you heard, the two of them had just come in from Canada that held the races up to get them time to qualify. So here we go.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a wonderful facility and the only half mile in the Chicagoland area. Now, I've got to ask you, were you involved with him when he was building this thing at all, or did that come along late? Did you come along later?
We've been married since 33.
So you were involved in this the whole time? Did you think he was crazy?
I say, are we horses?
Do you enjoy it yourself?
Oh yeah, we work 2 jobs in the summertime.
Okay, now I understand we've got something very, very important coming up, much more important than the racing, much more important than the racetrack. I understand that you guys have a pretty special wedding anniversary coming up.
60th.
60th wedding anniversary. 60th wedding. Is that absolutely incredible? I can't believe that. Listen, I don't want to hold you guys up because I know you've got work to do, and we could do an hour with you. And one of these days, I've been trying to get him on the show, folks, for this is our 8th year, and I've been trying to get him on from the beginning. Everybody said it couldn't be done. I did it. I'm real pleased, and now I'm going to put his wife to work. This is real easy. I'd like you to look at the camera and say,
Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back.
There is no question, without Harry and Sidney, there would not have been an Illiana Motor Speedway. I'm sure you can see my dilemma. I didn't want to push these fine folks who I very much admired and have the greatest respect for what they accomplished, but I knew the Speedway couldn't sustain itself if we couldn't draw at least 50,000 people there for an event. In a way, it was easier for me to deal with Kevin Dawson at Lake Geneva Raceway. Closer to my age, he knew. He knew what the future would bring if we didn't crack the television sports news barrier. Like Pete Jennen, I didn't think Harry Mulliner realized what television's omission had done to us, not to mention what it had done for our competitors for public attention. As I've gotten older, I think I understand it better. Why did I see it so clearly while Harry, Pete, and others in their age category didn't? Let me try it this way. The fact is, while I remember before there was television, it's a distant memory. Yes, I remember the family gathered around the big Zenith radio listening to the Green Hornet, the Great Gildersleeve, Jack Benny, and others. But it's a distant memory. It didn't really affect my life. Yes, it was part of my life, but most of my life was with television. On the other hand, people 20 years older than me spent most of their lives, at least the formative years, without television. It would probably be difficult for them to see how television was changing everything. I'm having a similar experience with the internet. I have no interest in social media. I don't participate in Facebook or any of the other ways people seem to keep in touch these days, yet it seems to be changing everything. I'm just not interested in what looks to me to be a time waster, as I'm sure television looked to Harry, Pete, and Sidney when they were busy building a sport before I was born. It's difficult to be aware of big change and what it means after your formative years. It's no one's fault, but the challenges change, and keeping one's eye on the ball becomes more difficult. Additionally, as important as keeping these tracks open is to me, there are more important things in life. Perhaps 6 months after the interview of Harry and Sidney passed away. A 60-year-long love story came to a close. A story that began in 1933 and continued for some 60 years. A story that included opening a motorcycle shop and making it grow. A story that included World War II. A story that included a young Harry Mulliner injured in a motorcycle racing accident along with his young wife Sidney creating Illiana Motor Speedway out of a vacant lot. Losing Sidney after 6 decades of marriage/partnership is life-ending for both people involved. Perhaps not physically life-ending, but certainly emotionally life-ending. We went back to Illiana Motor Speedway 2 years later, and I could see the reality of losing Sidney had drained the energy from Harry.
Well, I'm sure you can see why tonight is so special. That was just before your 60th wedding anniversary, and I understand you did get a chance to celebrate the 60th.
We did. Well, today is actually the 62nd.
So that
June 10th, 1933, when we got going on the racetrack and got married and opened up the business in Hammond, and that was our start. And she was with us ever since. She worked and helped maintain this place physically and with the pen and treasuries reports and all that. She was very active in this.
As a matter of fact, it's really a far more interesting story than we could ever do justice to here, but I want you to know just a little bit about this because this is quite a love story. We're talking about people that were together more than 60 years of their life, and in today's age of marriages that seem to last about 6 and 7 months, that's pretty remarkable. But it's more than that. Literally everywhere you go. What I didn't know, Harry, is that you had a Harley-Davidson dealership for 58 years?
Right, correct, 58 years. And they wanted us to modernize it and go to it, and we didn't renew the franchise. Right now we're not with the agency anymore.
Yes, I'm sorry.
We still have the business, but we're just coasting, so to speak, and running the races in the meantime. This would be a bigger part of our activity.
Yes, as a matter of fact, of course, everybody knows Mulliners. Everybody knows that it was Mulliners Harley-Davidson for so many years, but now it's just Mulliners. Interestingly enough, this is, I don't know exactly how to explain this and make it sound cohesive, but the fact of the matter is that, yes, this is his racetrack, and he and his wife did the racetrack. You and your wife also did the dealership. She was heavily involved there.
Correct.
And literally every biker that I have ever encountered knows Sidney Mulliner. Do you know that she's that well known?
That's right. That's why we're doing this. I figured I owe that to her. She was she was a partner, and she was a pal. Let's just use that word. She was a real pal, and I sure miss the situation. I sure miss her more than I. In fact, on the way out here, we have the cemetery right down the street, the road, and I was over there with some flowers just before coming here.
Little did I know at the time I would find myself in a similar position in just over a year when I lost my Chris. Looking back, I can't help but be struck by the parallels, and I understand why Harry had difficulty characterizing his relationship with Sidney. Yes, she was his wife, but she was also his partner, and, more important, she was his best friend. Very few men can come through something like this the same person who went in. I could see Harry was drained, and the last thing I was going to do was chase him to produce programming from Illiana Motor Speedway. To remember Sidney, let's check out a little of the action at this, the second annual Sidney Mulliner Memorial Race in 1995.
And here it is, the big late model shootout, and there's the green flag. It looks like number 17, Duke Nalon from Cherryville, Indiana, in his Pontiac Grand Prix, getting the jump on the field from the outside front row. But car number 41, driven by Mike McCulley, also from Cherryville, isn't going to let this Cutlass get passed by a Pontiac. Coming up the inside, it's car number 21, driven by the pride of Evanston, Illinois, Bobby Gash. And on the outside, it's John Nutley from Crestwood, looking for an opening. This is a first-class field of late models. Later in the race, number 41, Mike McCulley, is leading with number 14, Larry Middleton Jr. from East Hazelcrest, Illinois, pursuing. And look who's coming up on the inside. It's Frank Galinsky and his number 91, and he's flying. Later in the race, Galinsky leading comfortably, and there's trouble in turn 2, and many fast cars are involved. Look at them all, including Chicago's own Mike White. When the race resumed, Frank Galinsky put some distance on the field, and now on the white flag lap, it looks like the 7-time track champion is going to win the second annual Sidney Mulliner Memorial Race. This will be his third feature win of the season and his 102nd Illiana career victory. He's fast and smooth, and more than anything, he wanted to win this very special event honoring Illiana's First Lady. Tim Murtaugh reporting.
When the event was over, I was able to grab a moment with Harry Mulliner.
We're done. It was a wonderful, wonderful night of racing. Even though it threatened rain earlier today, it turned out to be a beautiful, beautiful evening. The one thing I want to say, Harry, is I think we did Sig's memory proud. You did a wonderful event tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. I sure appreciate it. I know she would have enjoyed being in something like this as part of it, yes.
No, absolutely no question about it. And watch the way we close this thing. I think you'll appreciate this. Girls, please tell the folks.
This one's for you, Sidney.
Just over a year later, I lost my partner and best friend too. I more than understand how draining it can be. I didn't expect to hear from Harry Mulliner after we covered that event, and I didn't. I probably should have pursued him a bit, but with my loss and his loss, my heart just wasn't in it. Frankly, I guess I thought Illiana would be gone shortly. Few people realize the commitment and energy it takes to operate a track, and with Sidney gone, somehow he kept things going for a few years. Harry passed away in 1999, and I feared that would be the end of Illiana Motor Speedway. It takes passion and commitment to take care of the endless details involved in operating a motorsport facility, and the rewards are few. There wasn't much I could do about it. I was dealing with my own loss. While covering the 2000 World of Wheels car show at McCormick Place in Chicago, we interviewed Mike Turkle, an Illiana racer who told us he knew the person who bought Illiana Motor Speedway, a man named Mike McCooley, and he was a dyed-in-the-wool racer, and Illiana would remain a motorsport facility. Of course, I was elated to hear it, and following the World of Wheels show, I chased down Mike McCooley, and he agreed to meet me at Illiana Motor Speedway so our audience would know what was happening. On a cold and blustery day in the middle of winter, February 27th, 2000, I interviewed Mike in turns 1 and 2 of the under construction track. It was important for me to get the information on the air as soon as possible because a lot of people are affected by the future of a racetrack, not the least of which are the racers who have to prepare cars for the upcoming season, if there is to be an upcoming season. Following are a few clips from that interview.
On this cold, blustery day in February, we may be bringing you the most important story that we're going to bring you in the year 2000, and I couldn't be really more pleased with this story, especially considering this is the start of a new century. I guess people are going to argue whether it's the start of a new century or not, because it may be the finish of an old century. Whatever it is, it's a real important time, and this is a very important story. And let me start by introducing our guest, and you are?
Mike McCooley.
Where are you from, Mike?
Schererville, Indiana.
All right, it is very cold and blustery. You guys are a little nippy, right? A little
yes,
cold?
And I'm losing my feather.
I know. We're going to go as quickly as we can here because this is a very important story. First of all, we are at Illiana Motor Speedway, and Luda, you know all about Illiana. Why is it called Illiana?
Indiana and Illinois together.
Very good. That's exactly right, because Illiana Motor Speedway is very close to the Illinois-Indiana border on US 30. Been here for many, many years. In addition to being saddened by the loss of Harry Mulliner, we're all, of course, very, very concerned that we're going to lose a facility because, of course, most of these facilities continue on because somebody really cares and really wants it, and Harry was that kind of a guy. I got word a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact, at World of Wheels, help me, Turkle?
Mike Turkle.
Mike Turkle, one of the competitors, he knows you.
My racers.
He knows you well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he says, no, Bill, there's nothing to worry about. He says that the fellow that bought it, Mike, is a dyed-in-the-wool hardcore racer, and it's going to continue as a track. Am I correct?
Always. And then late models.
And you did race late models?
Yes.
So you're aware the track is bumpy?
Oh, very bumpy.
Very. As a matter of fact, the last time I raced here was about 10 years ago, and it needed to be repaved then.
Yes, it did.
But it's not cheap to repave a half-mile track.
Not at all.
All right, one of the things that had gone on over the years, of course, is many people were pushing Harry all the time. You know, Harry, you need to repave it, you need to repave it. Of course, that's easy for the other people to say when they don't have to lay it out. The good news is, if I'm giving something away I shouldn't be giving away, you stop me. You're in the construction business.
Yes.
Well, as I looked around at this place, I must tell you, I got very, very encouraged. First of all, Chuck, if you would, show the audience the concrete wall here and pan around as you go, as we're talking, and swing all the way down to the area that's still going up. This concrete wall apparently is going all the way around the racetrack.
3,000 feet.
That is a ton of concrete.
That's a lot of wall.
But that's not the end of it. After that,
Oh, no.
You've got to put the steel poles up and the catch fencing.
Right. We have all the catch fences down the main straightaways. It's configured about the same way Daytona's was.
So, and that's all coming.
That's starting next week.
And lights.
And new Musco lighting system.
An entirely new lighting system.
Everything. Brand new.
And guess what? Chuck, did you show them the wall all the way down to the other end yet? You have to tell them, no, you're still getting there. I want the audience to see that before we get ahead, because that's not the end of the work that's going on here. We were talking a little bit. You're going to have a scoreboard now?
Yeah, we're going to have a scoreboard on the backstretch that's coming in. We also have a new quarter mile coming in.
No, let's not go so fast on this. Wait. A score. This isn't just a scoreboard. This is one of those that's going to show the positions of all the cars on the track?
Positions, it's a lap counter.
And lap counter.
And scoring.
And time.
Time, right.
So when guys are qualifying, you'll see the times
up on the board.
That's very cool.
You don't have to strain to hear them.
But not just that. You're apparently going for this transponder system too.
Right, we're working on that right now.
Okay, where all the cars are going to have a little radio signal in them when they cross the start, so there'll be no scoring problems or.
Right, exactly. There's a transponder goes in the trunk of the car, and you could have 30 cars out here, and it pulls every one of the stats up instantly as they cross the line.
This is state-of-the-art stuff.
Oh yeah.
Well, folks, I'm sure you can tell why I'm excited about this now. At one moment, I was concerned, and I hope this doesn't do a disservice to Harry's memory. We loved him dearly, but the fact that I'm excited about all these changes and the fact that the track is going to be state, I hope.
Yes, I think he would.
Yeah, I hope he understands my enthusiasm, you know, because he was such a terrific guy and such a dedicated racer. But that's not the end of it. State-of-the-art scoring with a huge, something that people can see, and hopefully the racers can see their times when they go across the line. Right. In addition to all that, Chuck, take a look at the pavement. Girls, as you can see, this is not exactly smooth.
Yes. I'm wait. She fixed everything. I'm start driving and see my time.
Here she what?
I'm with her.
You're with her. Chuck, if you're showing the audience the pavement, apparently this is all going to be repaved too.
Yes, everything's going to be ground down and completely repaved all the way around.
And that's not the end of it. You're also putting another track in the infield. Chuck, broaden your shot, swing over to the infield, because guess what? You're going to put a track within a track.
Right. Quarter mile will be coming. You'll be utilizing the front straightaway, and it'll have an X through the center where Victory Lane presentations will take place, so we can continue on to get the rest of the show going, plus have other events and divisions out here.
For those who would like to see the complete interview, the show is titled Illiana and Phoenix, and is posted on my Bill Wildt channel on YouTube. I was delighted to hear Illiana was going to remain a motorsport facility, and it was going to be bigger and better than ever. Mike McCooley was investing a ton of money, and I couldn't imagine anyone walking away from that kind of investment. For now, Illiana would remain the Chicago area's biggest racetrack. We didn't return to Illiana until July 12, 2003, when I once again caught up with Mike McCooley.
We are at Illiana Motor Speedway in Schererville, Indiana, and a couple of weeks ago we came here, and if you look at our website, msutv.com, you'll see that we had a picture of me standing there with my hands turned up by the Illiana Motor Speedway sign, kind of showing you that it was raining like crazy, which doesn't always show in pictures. And we were so disappointed because it's been about 5 years, at least 5 years, since we've been to Illiana Motor Speedway, and as a matter of fact, the last time we were here, it was about February. More than half of the track was completely gone. And I'm looking around and I'm saying, oh my God, will they ever get this thing back together again? Well, guess what? They sure did. And when I say they, I think I'm primarily talking about Mike, who's standing next to me. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Mike McCooley, owner of Illiana Motor Speedway.
The track now is absolutely beautiful. It's smooth all the way around, completely repaved, correct?
Oh yeah, everything inside the walls here has been completely redone. A lot of the catch fences, the lighting, you name it. About the only thing we haven't changed the grandstands, and if Cicero hadn't beat us to it, we might have got those changed.
That's what you were thinking about going to Cicero?
We were looking at a lot of the stands over there.
In addition to that, do you have any kind of a motorcycle background?
not at all. I rode for a lot of years, but
Well, I am really surprised because they do. Now, we're familiar with the big half mile. By the way, that's some late models out there warming up, getting ready to do some hot laps. And of course, we're all familiar with that. And Chuck, if you would, show the audience the quarter mile that we have in here. You promised you were going to build a second track, and you did.
we needed something for the beginner to get on. The half mile is very fast.
You bet.
And you hate to put somebody out there that has no experience. So I decided back years ago here, he had the quarter mile here in dirt. So we kind of recut everything back in and went off the old format, changed a little bit. Now I've got my beginner division.
I think you get the idea. Mike McCooley did an incredible job completely rebuilding Illiana Motor Speedway. The new facility was gorgeous.
The late model feature is underway, and as you can see, third in the point standing, Joe O'Connor is moving into the lead. It doesn't look like he's going to be out there by himself for very long, because here comes Mike White, the 00 car, and it looks like he's on the way to the front. Okay, we're later in the race because while Mike White and Joe O'Connor were going at it up front, number 8, Eddie Hoffman, was working his way forward, and guess what? It looks like he's caught Mike White. And by the way, Mike White did in fact, we skipped ahead in the race a little bit, Mike White did in fact get by Joe O'Connor, and about 5 minutes elapsed until this point in the race, and it looks like Eddie Hoffman is chasing down Mike White. Definitely a two-groove racetrack out there. We've got Eddie Hoffman inside, Mike White on the outside, and both going very fast. You don't really need a call on this one, folks. Just watch these two fine drivers work. Somebody's gone around. There's going to be a caution. And guess what? Here comes the number 16 car of Davey Weltmeyer, and he's coming fast. Now remember, Davey Weltmeyer, number 16, is your current point leader in the late model division. Mike White.
Motorsport facilities don't close because they lack beauty. They close because of a lack of public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation. We're completely out of time for this week, with only enough left to thank John Platania for his help putting these shows together. Me, I'm Bill Wildt. We'll pick up on this discussion next week.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com or email us directly at msutv@aol.com. We enjoy hearing from our audience and encourage you to let us know what you think. Now, this is not one of our usual next weeks promoting next week's program. This is a reminder that Motorsports Unlimited is now global on YouTube. Simply subscribe to Bill Wildt Motorsports Unlimited on YouTube and watch us anytime.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.